Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month decks. This is deck number 26 and it's titled Non-Binary Nuances. And if you haven't seen what we're doing here for Pride Month, we are building a commander deck for Magic the Gathering using two non-partner commanders, working with a budget of $100 or less and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ+ community every day for all of June. So our partner commanders today are going to be Gonti, Lord of Luxury, and Yahenni, Undying Partisan, making us a mono-black deck. Now, if you don't know anything about the Aetherborn in Magic the Gathering, they are created by excess Aether, and because of that, they have no assigned genders to them, making them all non-binary in terms of lore and story building. So because of that, we have two of the more famous Aetherborns here as the commanders. We've got Gonti, who is 2 black for a 2/3 legendary creature Aetherborn rogue. They've got Death Touch, and when they enter the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of that library in a random order. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. Then, their partner is Yahenni, which is 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature Aetherborn vampire. They've got haste, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, then sacrifice another creature, and Yahenni gains indestructible until the end of turn. So as you can kind of tell, these two don't really synergize with each other incredibly well. Gonti wants us to be stealing from our opponent's libraries, Yahenni wants us to be sacrificing our own creatures and killing our opponent's creatures. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of our themes for this deck and try to break down how exactly they function together. Our first major theme is Aetherborn. There's not a ton of Aetherborn in Magic, but the vast majority of them are mono-black, meaning we can kind of play an Aetherborn Kindred deck. And that lets us play cards like Gifted Aetherborn, which is black for a 2/3 Aetherborn vampire that simply has Death Touch and Lifelink. So a very simple card, but very effective, being able to serve as a phenomenal blocker, a phenomenal attacker, and it kind of rolls everything into one for what the Aetherborn want to be doing. They honestly are pretty efficient creatures, and it's a great way to kind of flood the board and do the things we want to do in mono black. Moving on to our second major theme of the deck, this one is servos, and more specifically, the Fabricate ability that was actually the Aetherborn's mechanic in the original Kaladesh set. So to that end, we have Weaponcraft Enthusiast, which is 2 and a black for a 0/1 Aetherborn Artificer, and it has Fabricate 2. So what that allows us to do is either put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature when it enters, or create 2 1/1 servo tokens. Most of the time we're going to be choosing the servos because we have actually a fair amount of servo synergies, but it's not impossible that we choose the +1/+1 counters, especially when you consider that our third theme for this deck is +1/+1 counters. And another great example, and a third Aetherborn to add to our list, is Aetherborn Marauder, which is 3 and a black for a 2/2 Aetherborn rogue. It's got flying, lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, move any number of +1/+1 counters from other permanents you control onto Aetherborn Marauder. So if we have been choosing the +1/+1 counter ability with our Fabricate abilities, then we can just make a giant Aetherborn Marauder that's pretty much a lethal threat to anyone at the table. But you'll also notice Gifted Aetherborn, Aetherborn Marauder both also have lifelink, so a lot of what we're doing is putting counters on things, making tokens, and also being able to gain a little bit of life to try to stay ahead of the curve of the rest of our opponents. That, though, is the end of our themes portion of this deck tech, and the next thing I want to do is take a look at some key cards in this deck, and these are cards that really synergize with what we're trying to do, and in a lot of cases are the value engines and win conditions, or just kind of like the MVPs of the deck. So starting off, we have Vanquisher's Banner, which is 5 mana for an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. We're going to choose Aetherborn. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. Now, like I said, there's not too many Aetherborn, and there's actually very, very few cards that reference Aetherborn specifically. I'm pretty confident there is exactly one, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes, but being able to draw a card every time we cast an Aetherborn spell is pretty much going to allow us to churn through our deck, make sure that we always have a consistent source of card draw. We can keep putting more and more creatures into play. All of those creatures are getting +1/+1. So Vanquisher's Banner helps us keep drawing through our deck, helps us keep pumping our creatures, and it's a great source of repeatable value. Moving on to our second key card, which is the only card that cares about Aetherborn as far as I'm aware. This is Midnight Entourage. And Midnight Entourage is 2 black for a 3/3 Aetherborn rogue. Other Aetherborn you control get +1/+1, and whenever it or another Aetherborn you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. This is an incredibly powerful ability to have, especially when you remember that we have Yahenni in our command zone. Yahenni can sacrifice our creatures for free, meaning we can always trigger that ability when we need to do so. Plus, like I said, it's the only card that cares about Aetherborn. I would love it if they print some more Aetherborn. This was actually a staple in the first standard deck that I ever played, so hopefully we'll get to see this come back in the future. Moving on to our final key card. This one is Kindred Dominance, and I know it's weird to put a board wipe in our key card section, but I do think it's worth it, because Kindred Dominance is 5 black for a sorcery that says choose a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't of the chosen type. This is a perfect way for us to just name Aetherborn and completely one-sided board wipe the rest of the table, because let's be perfectly honest, none of our opponents are going to be playing Aetherborn, and if they are, it's maybe Gonti, maybe Yahenni, probably nothing else. So if we can kind of just flood the board with our Aetherborn and then wipe the board, we can guarantee that we are left with our little army while our opponents have nothing. And hopefully, that should be able to easily push us toward a victory. That, though, is the end of our key cards section, so the next thing I want to do is take a little bit of a look at some cool interactions in the deck. And these are cards that synergize really well with each other, and in some cases are value engines, but in other cases are just fun cards I want to highlight. So starting off, our first cool interaction is between Marionette Apprentice and Defiant Salvager. So Marionette Apprentice, 1 and a black for a 1/2 human artificer. It's got Fabricate 1, and whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a great way to benefit from the fact that Yahenni is a sacrifice outlet, but it's also a great way for us to kind of just churn through our creatures, churn through our artifacts if we have servos, and then just drain out the rest of the table. Notably, this works very well with sacrifice outlets like Defiant Salvager, which is 2 and a black for a 2/2 Aetherborn Artificer, and you can sacrifice an artifact or creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Defiant Salvager, but you can activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So, while I'm not a big fan of the fact that this can only be done at sorcery speed, it is still an infinite sac outlet, so we can sacrifice any creatures that have been created and then put +1/+1 counters on the Salvager, and then also drain our opponents with the Marionette Apprentice, and then probably just smack somebody with a giant Defiant Salvager. So these two do work very well, even though Marionette Apprentice is not an Aetherborn. Moving on to our next pair of cool interactions, this one is between Metallic Mimic and Animation Module. 9 times out of 10 in this deck, when you play Metallic Mimic and you get to choose a creature type, you're going to want to name Aetherborn because it's going to act as a pseudo-lord effect. Basically, it's 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature shapeshifter. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It is the chosen type in addition to its other types, and each other creature you control of the chosen type enters with an additional +1/+1 counter. So this kind of gives a permanent +1 to all of our Aetherborn, which is very powerful. However, there is a unique side case where we might actually want to name Servo with Metallic Mimic, and that's because of Animation Module. Because animation module is 1 mana for an artifact, whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Then you can pay 3 and tap it, choose a counter on target permanent or player, and give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. Essentially, what we can do is if we've named servo with Metallic Mimic, we put a +1/+1 counter on any creature, doesn't matter which one, we can then pay 1 mana to make a servo. That servo will come into play with a +1/+1 counter, allowing us to again activate animation module. So this allows us to basically make a 2/2 servo token for every single mana that we are willing to spend. So if we have 5 mana, we make 5 1/1 servos, they all get a +1/+1 counter. We've just made 10 power worth of creatures. And this is infinitely repeatable provided we have the mana, but it's also a great way to just kind of refill our board if something happens, because the only thing that we would need is the animation module, the mimic, and then some way to get a counter on something, or possibly just even make a servo. So I think that's a pretty cool interaction, and it's a nice way to use Metallic Mimic in a way that doesn't pertain to our main creature type. That, though, brings us to the final part of our deck tech, which is the price of the deck. And today, our total deck price came in at $67.86, with the most expensive card taking a pretty significant portion of that budget, with Black Market Connections at $14.34. Black Market Connections, though, 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more. You can sell contraband, make a treasure token and lose a life. You can buy information, draw a card and lose 2 life. Or you can hire a mercenary, create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with changeling, you lose 3 life. The main reason this is in here, other than of course the fact that it can ramp us and draw us cards, is that it can make a changeling token, and because I mentioned earlier, it is incredibly difficult to come by Aetherborn creatures, having a changeling is actually just another Aetherborn, which is very powerful for this deck, and definitely something that we want to use as much as possible. Plus, we also talked about how we can gain life with this deck as well, so it's not unlikely to just spend 6 life, get all 3 modes, and then gain some of that life back. Anyway though, that is the end of our deck tech for today. So thank you all so much to everybody for watching. If you did enjoy the video, I would love it if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are making this final push toward 2,000 subscribers, and I think that we can get there by the end of the month, so I would love your support in doing so. As always, a massive shout out to our current patrons and channel members, and if you would like to join that amazing group of people, you can find us over on Patreon, patreon.com/dungeonlearnersguide, and right here on YouTube as a channel member. So once again, thank you to everybody for watching. I hope you all have had a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.